Alright, in this video we're going to talk about scientific calculator use. And to begin with, we're going to go to Amazon.com. Now, why I'm going here is I want to look at several types of scientific calculators. Calculators are slightly different, and so you're going to have to look at your calculator closely to see which kind you have. But you do need a scientific calculator for this course because you're going to need it to put numbers into your calculator in scientific notation. As we look through the variety of types of scientific calculators, we see some things in common. All scientific calculators will have the trigonometric functions, logs, cosines, tangents, etc. You're not going to actually have to use the cosines and tangents, etc., but you are going to see those buttons on the calculators. And again, they range a lot in price as well as the number of buttons and functions. This is one of my favorite. This is a Casio. It's $11.21. And as we look at this calculator, this button down here at the bottom labeled Exp is the one that we need for scientific notation. Different calculators might label this slightly differently. For example, some calculators label it with the letter E. Some of them label it with the letters EE, two capital E's. And we also sometimes see this button labeled as times 10 because that's exactly what it's going to stand for, the times 10 in our scientific notation. I saw one of those with the times 10. I think it's this one. Let's get a closer image. You can just barely see it down here. This is times 10 to the x. There is your scientific notation button. It's not always down there at the bottom in these calculators. Some calculators will put it in slightly different places, although every one I've brought up so far has it listed down there. If you have a graphing calculator, you're welcome to use it, although you don't have to have a graphing calculator. But a graphing calculator will typically put the scientific notation button, it's a little hard to see on this image, as a second function. And I believe it's this button right here. The second function is labeled EE, so you would hit the alpha key or the second function key, depending on what color it is, and then this button here to do your EE button. Alright, so let's come, again, just noting that you have this EE or EXP button. On this calculator, it is the second function of this pink button. There's a little bit of EE there in yellow, so you would hit the second button and then this one to get that EE button. Alright, now let's look at how we would use that button. If, for example, you had to type in the number 1.23 times 10 to the 4th on your calculator in scientific notation, you would literally type in the keys 1.23, and then for the times 10 raised to the power, you would hit your EE or EXP button. And that takes the place of the times 10 raised to the power. You don't actually ever hit the times, you don't hit the 10, you just hit that EEXP button, and then you type in the number 4. Your calculator will display that in a variety of ways, but typically it will look like something like your 1.23 in your calculator display, and then a little space, and then a 04. It might look like 1.23 in your calculator display, a little space, and then a 04 in smaller numbers in the at the far right. And so that's how your calculator is going to display it. If you need to type in 1.23 times 10 to the negative 4, that minus sign has to be punched in on your calculator using the change sign button. So you would literally type in 1.23. You would then type in your EE or EXP button for the times 10 raised to the power, and then you would need to find your change sign button. We'll look at those on the calculators in just a second. A lot of calculators will list it as a +/-. Some calculators will list it as a minus sign in parentheses, and then you would type in your number 4, and that would make it a -4. You don't actually use the minus sign, you use the change sign key. And again, your calculator is now going to display that in its display as 1.23, probably a little bit of space, and then you will see a -0.4 on the far right, either in regular size numbers or smaller size numbers. If we go back to our calculator page, I'll just show you a variety of these change sign. On this pink calculator, there's your change sign button. Notice that it's a minus sign in parentheses. On my favorite calculator, it is up here. Notice it is a plus/minus sign, and that's going to give you your minus sign on your Exp Button. You'll notice that this one does display a number in scientific notation, -1.23456789, 1 times 10 to the -99. That is how your calculator will display it, somewhat similar. As we look at a variety of others, let's see, this is a graphing calculator. Here is the minus sign in parentheses for your change sign. And let's look at this one. Your minus sign in parentheses is up here, and again we see a number displayed in scientific notation in the display, 8.9785900120. You see a little bitty times 10 to the -0.1, so it's actually displaying a number in scientific notation here. You need to get very familiar with your calculator, how it works, what it looks like, so you want to practice punching these numbers in. Here we see a number times 10 to the -11th. Here is the change sign button, the parentheses with the minus sign, and our EE button, you can just barely see it, is the second function of this button here. It is labeled as EE.